The first thing you need to understand about the training facility on Xylos 7 is the smell. It hits you before anything else. A mix of recycled oxygen, industrial lubricant, and something that can only be described as fierce sweat from a dozen different species. The air recyclers worked overtime in that place, but they never quite caught up. Not when you had cadets from 17 different star systems crammed into one observation deck. I was there as a contractor, not military, not official, just a guy who knew how to fix the targeting systems on the old Mark IV drones they still used for basic exercises. They called me tech support, but really I was just the guy who showed up when something broke. And on that station, something was always breaking. The deck stretched out in front of me like a massive glass bubble. Below, the training ground spread across what used to be a mining crater. They'd converted it into a combat simulation zone 3 centuries ago and never bothered to change the layout. The walls were pitted from old laser fire, the ground scarred from explosions both real and simulated. You could still see the rust-colored streaks in the rock where something had bled out years before. 147 cadets filled the observation deck. Most of them were like the others I'd seen at training facilities across the galaxy. Young, eager, terrified but too proud to show it. Their uniforms were crisp, their postures rigid, their eyes fixed on the holoscreens that showed the training grounds below. I leaned against the railing near the back, my toolbox at my feet. Nobody paid me much attention. I was the human in the room, which meant I was either invisible or an object of mild curiosity. Humans weren't common in this sector. We were too new, too unpredictable, too fragile. That's what they thought anyway. Commander Vreth stood at the main control console, her 4 arms folded across her chest. She was what the galaxy called a Thraxian, tall, reptilian, with scales that shifted from deep blue to silver depending on her mood. Right now, they were a cold, hard gray, the color of annoyance. "Cadets," she said, her voice echoing through the deck speakers, "today you will witness something that most soldiers go their entire careers without seeing. The Varkesh." A ripple went through the crowd. I saw a few cadets stiffen, others exchanged glances. One of the younger ones, a Vrexian with too many eyes, actually took a step back. I'd heard the name before. Everyone had. The Varkesh were legends in the worst possible way. Stories passed down through generations of soldiers, whispers in barracks late at night. The kind of creature that made even hardened veterans go quiet when the topic came up. Classified as a Class 12 threat, Vreth continued, scrolling through data on her console. Native to the Viren cluster, responsible for the extinction of 3 species before the Council finally contained them. They have no natural predators. They feel no pain. They cannot be reasoned with, cannot be bargained with, and cannot be stopped by conventional means. She paused, letting that sink in. The only reason we have this specimen is because it was captured as an infant, raised in containment. You will observe its combat capabilities today. You will learn what it means to face an enemy that knows no fear. The cadets leaned forward. I saw excitement in some of them, the kind of excitement that comes from not understanding what you're about to see. I understood. I'd been around long enough to know that words like Class 12 threat meant something real, something that had killed people like me, people better than me. The simulation floor below began to shift. Holographic terrain rose from the ground, trees made of light, buildings constructed from pixels, a whole false city that flickered into existence like a fever dream. The cadets murmured in appreciation. It was impressive technology, I'd give them that. Cost more than I'd make in a lifetime. "Release the Varkesh," Vreth ordered. A section of the floor slid open. Steam or something like it billowed out from the darkness below. The cadets pressed closer to the glass, craning their necks to see. The beast came up slowly at first, just a shape in the steam. Big. That was the first thing I noticed. Really big. The kind of big that makes your brain struggle to process what you're seeing. It emerged into the light, and the observation deck went completely silent. The Varkesh was wrong. That's the only word that fits. Its body was covered in chitinous plates that shimmered with an oily iridescence. 6 legs, each ending in claws that looked like they could tear through ship hulls. A head that seemed to shift and change as it moved, features melting and reforming like it couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be. But it was the eyes that got me. Dozens of them, tiny, black, and glittering with an intelligence that made my skin crawl. This wasn't just an animal, this was something else, something old. It stood in the center of the simulation field, perfectly still. Then it opened its mouth, a horrible, jagged thing, and let out a sound that made the glass vibrate. The cadets stumbled back. A few of them cried out. Commander Vreth watched with an expression that might have been approval. Now, she said, we begin. The simulation started with infantry drones. Standard training models, nothing special. They poured out of the holographic buildings in neat formations, their weapons raised, their targeting systems locked on. The Varkesh didn't move. It just stood there watching them come. The first wave opened fire. Energy bolts streaked across the field, lighting up the darkness with flashes of blue and white. They hit the beast dead center. I saw the impact, saw the energy splash across its carapace like water on stone. And the Varkesh didn't even flinch. It moved then, not fast exactly, it just flowed. One moment it was standing still, the next it was in the middle of the drone formation. Claws flashed, chitin scraped against metal. The drones fell apart like they were made of paper. I've seen combat, I've been in combat, but I'd never seen anything move like that. It didn't fight, it just destroyed. Every movement was efficient, brutal, and completely without hesitation. The cadets were silent now. The earlier excitement had drained away, replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. A Class 12 threat, Vreth said, her voice cutting through the tension, requires a response with the appropriate force. Observe. The simulation shifted. The infantry drones disappeared, replaced by something bigger, armored vehicles, heavy weapons platforms. The kind of equipment that made you feel safe, even in a war zone. The Varkesh charged directly into them. It didn't dodge, didn't try to avoid the incoming fire. It just took the hits and kept coming. I watched a missile explode against its flank, watched the flames wash over it without leaving a mark. One of the vehicles tried to retreat, but the beast was already there, claws ripping through armor like it was made of cloth. The simulation ended. The holographic terrain faded away, leaving just the beast standing in the empty crater. It looked up at the observation deck, at us, and I swear those dozens of eyes were looking right at me. Commander Vreth's scales flickered to a satisfied gold. You see, this is what awaits you in the darker reaches of the galaxy. Creatures that do not tire, do not feel, do not surrender. You must learn to face such enemies. You must learn to overcome them. She paused, scanning the room. And you will learn with this. The cadets shifted uncomfortably. I didn't blame them. That thing below looked like it could tear through the whole facility if it wanted to, and maybe it could. Prepare for live deployment, Vreth announced. I blinked. Live deployment. They weren't serious. The beast had just been released from containment. It had destroyed everything in the simulation. And now they were going to send cadets down there, with that thing. Commander, I said, I didn't mean to speak. The words came out on their own. That's insane. The room went quiet. Every eye turned to me. Vreth's scales darkened. Explain yourself, human. I swallowed. That thing just tore through an entire simulation. It didn't even slow down. And you want to send untrained cadets into an enclosed space with it. That's not training. That's a death sentence. The cadets stared at me. Some of them looked grateful that someone had said it. Others looked offended, like I'd questioned their courage. Vreth's eyes narrowed. The Varkesh is restrained. It wears a control collar. We are in complete command of its actions. Right, I said. Because control collars never malfunction. Because that thing down there is definitely under control and not staring up at us like we're the main course. The silence stretched out. I'd gone too far, I knew it. But the words were out there now, and I couldn't take them back. Vreth's scales shifted through a dozen colors in the span of a second. Then she laughed. It was a harsh, grating sound, like rocks grinding together. You think you understand what you're talking about, human. You've been here 3 months. You fix broken drones. You don't know anything about military protocol or combat training. I know that thing doesn't look like it wants to be here, I said. And I know what happens when you push something that's trapped into a corner. It fights back, and it doesn't care who gets hurt. Vreth stepped closer to me. She was taller than me by at least a foot, and she used every inch of it to loom over me. Your concern is noted, she said. Now return to your station and stay out of things you don't understand. The cadets were watching us both. I could see the conflict on their faces. Some of them had probably been thinking the same thing I had. They just didn't have the guts to say it. I grabbed my toolbox and backed away. My hands were shaking just a little. I hated that. I hated that she could get to me like that. But I also knew that if I stayed, I'd say something else. Something worse. And maybe that would have been better. Maybe I should have fought harder. But I didn't. I walked away. The deployment began an hour later. I watched from a secondary monitor in my workshop, where I was supposed to be recalibrating targeting arrays, but was really just trying to calm my nerves. The cadets went down in teams of 3, 6 teams total, each with a different objective. The Varkesh was released into the training grounds with them. They were supposed to use non-lethal capture techniques. They were supposed to show they could handle the beast. They were supposed to survive. I watched the first team move into position. They were young, so young. Some of them probably hadn't seen real combat before. They thought they were ready. They thought their training would see them through. The Varkesh was in the center of the simulation field again. It hadn't moved since the last exercise. It just stood there, waiting, watching. Team 1 approached from the east. They were good. I could see that even from my monitor. Good positioning, good communication, good tactics. They'd clearly studied the beast's movements from the earlier exercise. But they hadn't studied what came next. The Varkesh attacked without warning. One moment it was still. The next it was on top of them. Claws flashed. I saw one of the cadets go flying, his body hitting the ground with a sickening thud. The others scrambled, trying to get away, but the beast was already there, already moving, already destroying. The simulation ended. The Varkesh stopped mid-attack, frozen by the control collar. The cadets on the ground lay motionless. I couldn't tell if they were alive or dead. Team 1 failed, Vreth announced. Team 2, you're up. I couldn't watch anymore. I turned away from the monitor, my stomach churning. This wasn't training. This was slaughter. And they were calling it preparation. The hours passed. Team after team went down into that crater. Team after team got destroyed. The cadets who survived were traumatized, their eyes glassy, their movements mechanical. The ones who didn't, well, I tried not to think about them. Night fell on Xylos 7. Not that you could tell from inside the station. The artificial lights stayed on, harsh and unforgiving. But I knew it was night because the shift changed and the new crew came in, their faces fresh and eager. They wouldn't be fresh for long. I was in my workshop when I heard the commotion. Voices raised in alarm. Boots running on metal floors. The sound of someone screaming. I dropped my tools and ran. The observation deck was chaos. Cadets were pressed against the glass, pointing at the training grounds below. Commander Vreth was at the console, her scales a frantic orange, her hands flying across the controls. The collar is offline, someone shouted. We've lost control of the Varkesh. I pushed through the crowd trying to see what was happening. The simulation field below was dark. No holographic terrain, no targets, nothing but the beast. And it was moving, not like before, not the controlled, measured movements of the exercise. This was different, this was panicked. It was running. The Varkesh, the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, was running from something. I watched it sprint across the crater floor, its massive legs pumping, its claws digging into the dirt. It was heading for one of the access tunnels, the same tunnel that led up to the observation deck. To us. Shut the blast doors, Vreth yelled. Now. The doors started to close, heavy metal plates sliding down from the ceiling, sealing off the tunnel entrance. But the beast was fast, faster than anything that size should be. It reached the entrance just as the doors were about to close. For a moment, I thought it would be trapped. Then it threw itself forward, squeezing through the gap with inches to spare. The doors slammed shut behind it. Seal the observation deck, Vreth ordered. Get everyone out of here, now. The cadets scattered, but I stayed. I couldn't move. My feet were rooted to the floor as I watched the beast climb. Up through the tunnel, past the maintenance levels, past the storage bays. I could see it on the internal monitors, moving with a speed that seemed impossible. It was coming straight for us. And then it stopped. Right outside the observation deck, right on the other side of the reinforced glass. The Varkesh stood there, breathing hard. Its chest heaved, its claws scraped against the metal floor, and its dozens of eyes were fixed on one person in the room. On me. I felt the blood drain from my face. What the hell? The beast stared at me for a long moment. Then it did something I never expected, something that made the entire room go completely silent. It lowered its head, and it whimpered. The sound was small, pathetic. Nothing like the beast that had torn through simulations and soldiers alike. It was the sound of something terrified, something looking for safety. Something looking for me. Commander Vreth stared at me, her scales pale with shock. What did you do, human? I didn't do anything, I said, my voice shaking. I was just standing here. The beast whimpered again, pressing its massive head against the glass. I could see the collar around its neck, still sparking where the control circuits had fried, and I could see its eyes. They weren't the eyes of a killer. They were the eyes of something young, something lost, something that had just been turned loose in a world it didn't understand. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the adrenaline, maybe it was the fear. Maybe it was just the fact that I was the only human in a room full of creatures who had never seen one of their own face down something like this before. But I walked toward the glass. Don't, Vreth warned. You don't know what it'll do. Neither do you, I said. And right now, it's looking at me like I'm the only thing in this station that won't hurt it. I reached the glass. The beast was right on the other side, close enough that I could see the details of its chitinous skin. Up close, it looked even more alien, more wrong, but also sad. I raised my hand, pressing my palm against the glass. The beast watched me, its dozens of eyes blinking in sequence. Then it raised one of its claws and touched the same spot on its side of the barrier. The cadets gasped. Commander Vreth's scales went through a dozen colors in the span of a second. And I realized something that changed everything. The beast wasn't a monster. It was a child, a baby, the most dangerous creature in the galaxy, and it was just a scared kid looking for someone to trust. Open the door, I said. What? Vreth stared at me like I'd lost my mind. Open the damn door. No, that's suicide. Look at it, I said, pointing at the beast. It's not trying to attack. It's not trying to get in here and kill everyone. It's scared. It's alone. And for some reason it thinks I can help. The beast whimpered again. The sound was heartbreaking. Vreth looked from me to the beast and back again. Her scales flickered through colors I'd never seen before. Doubt, uncertainty, fear. Your funeral, human, she said, and she hit the release. The blast doors slid open. The beast pushed through them and into the observation deck. The cadets screamed and scrambled backward. And I stood my ground. The beast approached me slowly like it was afraid of spooking me, which was ridiculous given that it could have killed me with one swipe of its claws. But it didn't. It just came closer and closer until it was right in front of me. I could feel its breath on my face, hot and strange, smelling of things I couldn't identify. Up close it was huge, bigger than a shuttle, bigger than anything I'd ever seen up close, and its eyes were all fixed on me, waiting for something. "Hey," I said softly. "Hey, it's okay, I'm not going to hurt you." I don't know why I said that. It was dumb. The thing could have crushed me like a bug, but it seemed to understand. It let out another whimper, softer this time. And then it did something that made everyone in the room gasp. It lay down at my feet, laid its massive head on the floor and just waited, like a dog waiting for a treat, like a child waiting for their parent to tell them everything was going to be okay. I crouched down, reaching out a hand. The beast watched me, its dozens of eyes tracking my movement. I hesitated for a moment. Then I touched its head. The chitin was warm, smooth, almost like glass, and it vibrated slightly, humming with some internal energy I couldn't identify. The beast let out a long, slow breath, and I swear I could feel the tension leave its body. It relaxed. Completely and totally relaxed, like it had been holding its breath for years and had finally let it go. "It's okay," I whispered. "I've got you." And in that moment, I realized something else, something that made me feel a lot braver than I actually was. The Varkesh wasn't dangerous because it was a killer. It was dangerous because it was afraid, because it had been trapped and studied and prodded and poked and turned into a weapon, because no one had ever bothered to treat it like a living thing. But I did, and that made all the difference. Commander Vreth's voice cut through the silence. How did you do that?" I looked up at her, at all of them, the cadets, the officers, the technicians, every single one of them staring at me like I'd just performed a miracle. "I didn't do anything," I said. "I just treated it like something worth saving." The beast nuzzled against my hand, and I felt something shift in the room, a change in the atmosphere. The tension began to ease, the fear began to fade. And for the first time that day, I thought maybe we might be okay. Part 2. The Varkesh stayed at my feet for 3 hours. 3 solid hours of me sitting on the cold metal floor of the observation deck, my hand resting on its head, while the entire facility buzzed with confusion and fear and something that might have been hope. Cadets filtered in and out. Some just wanted to see, others wanted to record. A few tried to approach, but the beast would growl low in its throat, a sound that vibrated through the floor and made my teeth ache. It wasn't aggressive exactly, it just didn't want them near me. I couldn't blame it, I didn't want them near me either. Commander Vreth hovered at the edge of the room, her scales cycling through a dozen shades of uncertainty. She'd called in every expert on the station, biologists, xenologists, behavioral specialists. None of them could explain what they were seeing. "The Varkesh has never shown anything like this," one of them said, tapping frantically at a data pad. "In all our records, in all our research, it's never bonded with anything. It's never even shown recognition of another living creature." "Until now," Vreth said. Her voice was flat, emotionless, but I could see something in her eyes, something that looked a lot like fear. "Let me take it back," I said. The room went quiet. "Take it back where?" Vreth asked. "I don't know. Somewhere it can be safe. Somewhere they're not going to use it for training exercises or experiments or whatever else you have planned." "That's not possible," Vreth said. "The Varkesh is a Class 12 threat. It can't be released into the wild. It can't be kept as a pet. It has to be contained. So you'll just keep it in a cage. Keep poking it and prodding it until it finally snaps. Watch your tone, human." I stood up. The beast stirred, lifting its head to watch me. Its dozens of eyes blinked in sequence, like a wave of darkness passing over its face. "Look," I said, "I know you don't want to hear this from me. I'm just a contractor. I fix broken equipment. But whatever you're doing with this creature, it's wrong. It's scared. It's alone. And it came to me because I was the only person in this station who didn't treat it like a monster." Vreth's scales darkened. "You're a human. You're fragile. Your species has been in the galactic community for less than a century. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Maybe not," I said, "but I know what I'm looking at. And I know that whatever you do next is going to determine whether this creature stays calm or goes on a rampage that kills everyone on the station." The beast growled again, a warning. Vreth took a step back. "I'll make you a deal," I said. "Let me take it to one of the lower levels, somewhere quiet, somewhere it feels safe, and I'll stay with it. I'll keep it calm. We can figure out what to do next." Vreth stared at me for a long moment. Then she glanced at the beast, at its dozens of eyes fixed on her, and made a decision. "Fine," she said, "but if it hurts anyone, if it causes any damage." "It won't," I said, "I promise." The beast got to its feet as I started moving. It followed me like a shadow, massive and terrifying and somehow completely docile. The cadets scattered as we passed, pressing themselves against walls, their eyes wide with fear. And I walked through them, feeling their stares on my back, and wondered what I'd just gotten myself into. The lower levels were quiet. They always were. The Xylos 7 facility was built in layers, with the upper levels reserved for training and observation, the middle levels for living quarters and administration, and the lower levels for storage and maintenance. And down here, in the darkness and the silence, the beast seemed to relax. Its breathing slowed. Its claws stopped scraping against the floor. It followed me into a large storage bay and looked around with what I could only describe as curiosity. "See," I said, "it's not so bad down here, quiet, dark, no one poking at you." The beast made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that might have been a response. I had no idea what it meant, but it didn't sound hostile. I found a crate to sit on. The beast lay down at my feet, resting its massive head on its claws. It watched me with its dozens of eyes, and I watched it back. "What am I supposed to do with you?" I asked. The beast blinked, all its eyes at once. It was an unsettling sight, but I was starting to get used to it. "I can't keep you down here forever," I said. "They're going to come for you eventually. They're going to want to put you back in your cage." The beast growled, soft and low. "I know," I said. "I don't want that either, but I don't know what else to do." The beast nudged my hand with its head. The chitin was smooth and warm against my skin. I ran my fingers over it, feeling the ridges and grooves of its natural armor. "You need a name," I said. "I can't keep calling you the beast. That's not fair." The beast made another chittering sound. "How about something simple, something that doesn't sound like a weapon?" I thought for a moment. "How about Kesh? That's part of your species name, and it sounds friendly." The beast tilted its head. Then it made a sound that might have been approval, or might have been hunger. I wasn't sure. "Kesh it is," I said. "Welcome to the world, Kesh." The first night passed without incident. Kesh slept at my feet, its massive body rising and falling with each breath. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. I kept waiting for something to happen, for the beast to wake up and tear me apart, but it never did. In the morning, someone brought food. A Vrexian tech who looked terrified, her too many eyes darting nervously between me and Kesh. "The commander wants to know." "She wants to know if you need anything," the tech said. "Tell her I need time," I said, "and tell her I need her to stop sending people down here. Kesh doesn't like strangers." "Kesh." I named him, seemed like the right thing to do. The tech nodded, made a note on her datapad, and scurried away. Kesh watched her go, his eyes tracking her movement until she was out of sight. "You're not going to eat anyone, are you?" I asked. Kesh made a sound that might have been a huff or a laugh. I wasn't sure. "That's what I thought," I said. The days blurred together. I lost track of time. Kesh and I developed a routine: wake up, eat, explore the lower levels, sleep. It was simple, it was quiet, and for the first time in a long time I felt like I was actually doing something that mattered. But I knew it couldn't last. I knew the facility would eventually want Kesh back, and I knew I'd have to make a choice. Then it happened. I was sitting in the storage bay reading a datapad when the alarm started. Klaxons, red lights, the sound of boots running on metal floors. Kesh bolted upright, his dozens of eyes wide. He looked at me, then at the door, then back at me. "Stay here," I said. "I'll find out what's happening." I ran through the corridors, following the sounds of chaos. The alarms blared, and I could hear something else beneath them, something that sounded like laser fire. I rounded a corner and almost ran into a group of cadets. They were armed. Their weapons were drawn. "What's happening?" I asked. "Containment breach," one of them said. "Level 4. Something got loose in the research labs." My blood went cold. What kind of something? "I don't know. The commander says it's a Class 10. We're supposed to evacuate the lower levels." Class 10. That was bad. Not Varkesh bad, but bad enough. And it was in the research labs, which meant it was probably something they'd been experimenting on. "I need to get back to Kesh," I said. "Kesh?" The cadet looked confused. "The Varkesh, he's in the storage bay." The cadet's eyes went wide. "You can't go down there, the containment breach." "Kesh is down there," I said. "And if that thing finds him, it's going to start a fight that'll tear this facility apart." I didn't wait for a response. I turned and ran back toward the storage bay. Kesh was still where I'd left him. But he wasn't calm anymore. He was pacing, his claws scraping against the floor, his dozens of eyes darting around the room. "Hey," I said. "Hey, it's okay." Kesh made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that I'd learned to recognize as fear. "I know," I said. "Something's wrong, but we're going to be okay." The lights flickered. Then they went out completely, plunging us into darkness. Kesh made a noise, a growl this time. I heard him moving, heard his claws scraping against the floor. "Stay close to me," I said. "Don't go anywhere." I fumbled for my flashlight, found it, and turned it on. The beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the storage bay. Kesh was right next to me, his massive body pressed against mine. He was shaking, actually shaking. "What's out there?" I asked. Kesh made another sound. It wasn't a growl, it was a whimper. And then I heard it, something moving in the corridor, something that was not a person. The thing that came through the door was not what I expected. I'd been preparing myself for some kind of monster, claws and teeth, and all the things that made the galaxy dangerous. But this was different. It was humanoid, sort of. Tall and thin and wrong, with too many joints and a face that seemed to shift and change as I watched it, like it couldn't decide what it was supposed to look like. I'd heard stories about Class 10 threats, shapeshifters, mimics, things that could copy anything they saw, anything they touched. And this one had been in the research labs, which meant it had been exposed to all kinds of alien biology, including Kesh. "Stay back," I said, my voice shaking. "Don't come any closer." The thing took another step forward. Its face shifted, and for a moment I saw something that looked almost human, almost familiar. Then it opened its mouth and screamed. The sound was like nothing I'd ever heard. It wasn't a noise. It was a force. A physical force that slammed into me and sent me flying backward into the storage bay. I hit the ground hard, my head cracking against the floor. The world went fuzzy for a moment. I blinked, trying to clear my vision, and saw the thing coming toward me. And then I saw Kesh. The Varkesh was between us. His massive body blocked the doorway. His claws extended. his dozens of eyes blazing with something that might have been rage. "Kesh," I said, don't hurt it." Kesh looked back at me. His eyes blinked, and he made a sound that I couldn't quite identify. Then he turned to the thing in the doorway. And he charged. The fight was quick, brutal. Kesh was bigger, stronger, faster. He hit the mimic like a wrecking ball, slamming it into the wall and pinning it there with his claws. The mimic screamed again, shifted, tried to change into something else, but Kesh wasn't having it. He pressed harder, his claws digging into the mimic's form, holding it in place. "Kesh," I said, stumbling to my feet, "let it go." Kesh looked at me. His eyes were wild. But there was something else there too, something that looked like confusion. "It's not a threat anymore," I said. "Just let it go." Kesh hesitated, then slowly he backed away. The mimic slumped to the floor, its form flickering and shifting. It looked at me with that shifting, wrong face, and I saw something in its expression that I hadn't expected. "Fear." "What are you?" I asked. The mimic didn't answer. It just stared at me, its form flickering. And then it did something that made my blood run cold. It shifted, changed, and when it was done, it looked exactly like me. "Kesh," I said, "that's not me, that's not me." Kesh looked from me to the mimic and back again. His dozens of eyes blinked. He made a sound that might have been confusion. "Kesh," I said, "it's me. It's me." The mimic spoke with my voice. "Kesh, it's me, it's me." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Don't listen to it, don't listen to it." Kesh took a step forward, toward the mimic. "Kesh," I said, "please, it's me." Kesh stopped, his eyes blinked again. And then he moved. Kesh moved toward the mimic. The mimic, me, smiled. It looked exactly like me, right down to the grease stains on my uniform. Kesh reached the mimic. He sniffed at it, his massive head inches from its face. "Kesh," the mimic said, using my voice, "it's me, it's me." And Kesh did something I didn't expect. He bit it. The mimic screamed, not with my voice, with its own, a horrible shrieking thing that made my ears bleed. Kesh shook his head and the mimic flew across the room, slamming into the wall. It didn't get up. Kesh looked at me. His eyes blinked. He made a sound that might have been satisfaction. And then he trotted back to me, laid his massive head in my lap and whimpered. "You didn't hurt it too bad, did you?" I asked, stroking his head. Kesh made another sound, a rumbling, purring thing that I'd never heard from him before. "We should go," I said. "We should find the others, make sure everyone's okay." Kesh got to his feet. He looked at the mimic, then back at me. "Let's go," I said. We moved through the corridors. I could hear sounds of chaos everywhere, alarms, screaming, the crackle of laser fire. But we didn't encounter any other threats. It seemed like the mimic had been alone. We found Commander Vreth in the main control room. She was barking orders at a dozen different screens, her scales cycling through an angry red. "Commander," I said. She spun around. Her eyes widened when she saw Kesh. "Get that thing out of here," she said. "He's not a thing," I said, "and he just saved my life. There was a mimic in the lower levels. Kesh took it out." Vreth stared at me. "A mimic, a class 10. "Yeah, it was in the research labs. I don't know how it got out, but it did, and it came after me. Kesh stopped it." Vreth's scales flickered. She looked from me to Kesh and back again. "Show me," she said. We led her to the storage bay. The mimic was still there, unconscious, its form flickering. "Secure it," Vreth ordered. "And get it back to containment." The technicians moved in, surrounding the mimic with stun fields and restraining devices. I watched them work, feeling a strange sense of satisfaction. "Kesh," I said, "good boy." Kesh made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that might have been pleasure. Vreth turned to me. Her scales were a strange color, something between blue and gold. I'd never seen that combination before. Human, she said, what do you want? Excuse me. I asked you what you want, for saving my station, for protecting my crew. What do you want? I looked at Kesh, at his dozens of eyes fixed on me, at the trust I could see in them. I want him, I said. I want to take him somewhere safe, somewhere he won't be used as a weapon or an experiment, somewhere he can just live. Vreth stared at me for a long moment. Her scales shifted through a dozen colors. Done, she said. I blinked. What? I said, done. You can have the Varkesh. You can take it wherever you want. You've earned that much. I stood there stunned. I hadn't expected that. I hadn't expected any of it. Thank you, I said. Vreth nodded, but if it harms anyone. It won't, I said. I promise. Vreth looked at Kesh, at the creature that had been the most dangerous thing in the galaxy, at the beast that had saved my life. Get out of here, she said, before I change my mind. I didn't need to be told twice. I led Kesh through the station, through the corridors and up through the access tunnels. We reached the surface, and I breathed the fresh air for the first time in what felt like forever. The sky was dark. Stars stretched out in every direction, and in the distance I could see the lights of a transport ship. You ready? I asked. Kesh made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that might have been yes. We walked toward the transport ship. Kesh followed me like a shadow, massive and terrifying and somehow completely docile. They unleashed the galaxy's most dangerous beast for training, and it ran straight to the human for safety. I'm still not sure why. Maybe it was because I was the only one who didn't treat it like a monster. Maybe it was because I was the only one who showed it kindness. Or maybe, just maybe, it was because Kesh knew something that everyone else had forgotten. That sometimes the scariest thing in the galaxy isn't the beast, it's the people who create them. Part 3. The transport ship was small, barely big enough for 2 passengers, let alone a creature the size of a small shuttle. The pilot, a crusty old Vrexian with too many scars, took one look at Kesh and nearly passed out. You're not serious, he said, his voice cracking. Dead serious, I said. He's coming with us. That thing is a Class 12 threat. It could tear this ship apart. He won't, I said. He's with me. The pilot stared at me, then at Kesh, then back at me. You're insane, he said. Yeah, I said, probably, but I'm also paying you. So let's go. The pilot muttered something under his breath but started the engines. The ship lifted off, leaving the Xylos 7 facility behind. Kesh pressed his head against the window, watching the station shrink below. He made a sound, a soft, chittering thing that I'd come to recognize as contentment. See, I said, I told you it would be okay. Kesh blinked, all his eyes at once. Where are we going? The pilot asked. I thought about it. I had no idea. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have a destination. I just knew I had to get Kesh away from that place. Just keep flying, I said. I'll figure it out. Days passed, or maybe weeks. Time was hard to measure in the emptiness of space. The pilot slept in shifts, and I spent most of my time with Kesh, learning his habits, his sounds, his moods. He was smarter than I'd thought, much smarter. He could understand my words, my tone, my body language. He could even respond in his own way, with chitters and clicks and growls that seemed to have meaning. We developed our own language, a system of sounds and gestures that let us communicate. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Kesh, I said one day, I need to know something. Why did you come to me? In the observation deck, why did you choose me? Kesh tilted his head. His dozens of eyes blinked. I mean, I said, there were hundreds of people in that room, soldiers, commanders, experts. Why did you pick the human? Kesh made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that I couldn't quite translate. I don't understand, I said. Kesh nudged my hand with his head. Then he made another sound, a soft, rumbling thing that almost sounded like a purr. I felt something shift in my chest, a warmth that I hadn't felt in a long time. "Okay," I said. "Okay, I think I get it." Kesh purred again, and I realized that I didn't need to know the reason. I just needed to be here. The pilot found us a planet, a small, uninhabited world on the edge of the galaxy, the kind of place where no one would bother us, the kind of place where Kesh could be free. "You sure about this?" the pilot asked as we prepared to land. "Yeah," I said, "I'm sure. He's not going to hurt anyone out here." "He doesn't hurt anyone. He just wants to be left alone." The pilot looked at me, then at Kesh. "All right," he said, "but if something goes wrong, don't come looking for me." "I won't." The ship landed on a grassy plain. The sky was green, which I'd never seen before. The grass was purple. The air smelled like flowers and something else that I couldn't identify. Kesh stepped off the ship. He looked around, his dozens of eyes taking in everything. Then he made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that I'd never heard before. "Welcome home," I said. Kesh looked at me, then he nudged my hand with his head. "You want me to stay?" I asked. Kesh made another sound, a soft, rumbling thing that might have been yes. I looked at the pilot, at the ship that could take me back to civilization. "Give me a week," I said. "Come back in a week." The pilot nodded. "If you're not here, I'll assume you're dead." "Fair enough." The ship lifted off, leaving Kesh and me alone on the purple grass. "All right," I said. "Let's see what this place has to offer." The week passed quickly. Kesh and I explored the planet, and we found a small cave that could serve as shelter. I learned to catch the local wildlife, small, six-legged things that tasted like chicken, and Kesh learned to wait patiently while I prepared the meals. We developed a rhythm, a way of being together that felt natural. Kesh didn't try to dominate me. I didn't try to control him. We just were. The pilot came back. He landed the ship and looked at me, standing on the grass with Kesh at my side. "You're still alive," he said. "Yeah," I said, "we're still alive." The pilot stared at Kesh, at the creature that had been the most dangerous thing in the galaxy. "Are you staying?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "I think I am." The pilot nodded. "All right, good luck." He left, and Kesh and I were alone again. Years passed. I built a life on that world, a small cabin, a garden, a routine that kept me busy and Kesh content. We were happy. I never thought I'd say that, not after everything that had happened, but we were happy. And then something changed. I noticed it first in Kesh's behavior. He was restless, pacing, making sounds that I couldn't quite translate. He looked at the sky more often, his dozens of eyes fixed on the stars. "Something wrong?" I asked. Kesh made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that I'd never heard before. "Can you show me?" Kesh led me to the highest point on the planet, a hill overlooking the purple grass and the green sky. He looked up at the stars and made another sound. And I saw it in the distance, a ship. But not just any ship, a ship with markings I recognized. "Council markings." "They found us," I said. Kesh made a sound, a growl low and deep. "Easy," I said. "Let's just see what they want." The ship landed near our cabin. A delegation came out, soldiers in gleaming armor, scientists with data pads, and at their head a figure I recognized. Commander Vreth. She looked older. Her scales were faded, her forearms thinner, but her eyes were the same, sharp, calculating, and full of something I couldn't quite identify. "Human," she said, "it's been a long time." "Commander," I said, "what do you want?" "I want to see the Varkesh. His name is Kesh." Vreth blinked. "What?" I named him. "He's not a weapon, he's not an experiment, he's my friend." Vreth stared at me. Then she looked at Kesh, who was standing behind me, his dozens of eyes fixed on the delegation. "It's remarkable," she said. "I've never seen anything like it, a Varkesh that's so calm." He's calm because I treat him like a living thing, I said, not a monster. Vreth's scales flickered. She turned to her delegation and made a gesture. They retreated, giving us space. I'm not here to take him, she said. I'm here to ask for help. I blinked. Help. The mimics, she said, they've been spreading. The outbreak on Xylos 7 was just the beginning. They're everywhere now, and we can't stop them. That's not my problem. It is your problem, she said, because you and Kesh are the only ones who can stop them. I laughed. It was bitter and sharp. You want me to fight your war after everything you did to Kesh? No, she said. I want you to help us understand them. The mimics are adapting, changing. We think they're learning from Kesh, from the Varkesh. And if that's true, then Kesh might be the key to stopping them. I looked at Kesh. He was watching me, his dozens of eyes calm and waiting. No, I said, we're done. Human. I said no. Vreth's scales flickered. She looked at Kesh, then back at me. Please, she said, I'm not asking as a commander. I'm asking as someone who's seen what happens when we don't understand what we're dealing with. We created this problem, and I don't want to see it destroy everything. I looked at Kesh. He made a sound, a soft, rumbling thing that I'd come to recognize as trust. You want to help? I asked. Kesh chittered, a sound that might have been yes. You sure? Kesh nudged my hand. I sighed. All right, but we do this my way. Vreth nodded. Whatever you say. We returned to the galaxy. Kesh and I, the pilot who'd first taken us to that world, old and gray and still flying, was the one who brought us back. Didn't think I'd see you again, he said. Neither did I said, but here we are. We arrived at a station on the edge of Council space. The place was packed with soldiers and scientists, and a dozen species I'd never seen before. They all stared as we walked through the corridors, Kesh at my side. Make way, Vreth said, make way. We reached a lab, a massive room filled with screens and data and scientists in white suits. This is it, Vreth said. This is where we're studying the mimics. And you need Kesh's help. We need his DNA, his biological signature. We think the mimics are trying to replicate him, but they can't quite get it right. If we can figure out why, we might be able to stop them. I looked at Kesh. He was watching the scientists, his dozens of eyes blinking. What do you think? I asked. Kesh made a sound, a chittering, clicking thing that might have been approval. All right, I said. Let's do this. The weeks that followed were strange. Kesh was poked and prodded and studied, but it was different this time. The scientists were respectful. They listened to me when I said Kesh was uncomfortable. They backed off when I said he needed rest. And slowly, we started to make progress. We've found something, one of the scientists said one day. The Varkesh's biology is incredibly advanced. It can adapt to almost any environment, almost any threat. And the mimics are trying to copy that adaptability, but they're missing one crucial component. What's that? I asked. The emotional center, she said, the part of the brain that processes, well, emotions, fear, loyalty, trust. The mimics can copy the physical form, but they can't copy the bond. And that's what makes Kesh different. I looked at Kesh. He was watching me, his dozens of eyes calm and trusting. So that's why he came to me, I said, because I was the first person who showed him trust. The scientist nodded. I think so. The Varkesh is a social creature. It needs bonds, it needs connection. And when you gave it that connection, you changed everything. I felt something shift in my chest, a warmth that I'd been carrying for years. He changed me too, I said. The scientist smiled. I know. The mimic invasion was stopped. Not with weapons, not with violence, with understanding, with empathy. We found a way to communicate with them, to show them that they didn't have to be weapons, that they could be something more. And Kesh was the key. Kesh, the most dangerous beast in the galaxy. Kesh, the creature that had been created to be a weapon, Kesh, who had run to the human for safety. I stayed with him years more, decades. We roamed the galaxy, visiting worlds and species, showing them what trust could do, what connection could do. And I realized something that I'd known all along but had never been able to put into words. The galaxy is full of monsters, but some monsters are just scared children looking for someone to trust. And if you can find it in yourself to be that someone, to show them kindness when everyone else shows them fear, you can change everything. They unleashed the galaxy's most dangerous beast for training, and it ran straight to the human for safety. Because sometimes, the scariest thing in the galaxy isn't the monster. It's the people who don't believe in compassion. And sometimes, all it takes is one person to prove them wrong.